Hey there, I'm Jess, and it's so great to be with you for a few moments here today. I want to welcome you to our online version of Kingston Standard Church. If you are watching with us for the first time, or if you're returning to our channel, we have lots of different resources that are available to families, both on Facebook and on YouTube. All you have to do is just search up Kingston Standard Church Cabin Kids, and our Facebook page and YouTube channels will pop up so that you are able to access those other interactive resources. So head on over and check those out. Part of our mission as a church is to equip parents for the conversations that they will have with their families as they grow and follow Jesus together. And one of the ways in which we seek to do that is through connecting the themes of Scripture to our family videos. I would love to personally invite you to connect with us online or in person if you are in the Kingston area. We would love to see you. But in the description box below here, you're gonna see a link that will take you to our website. Feel free to head over and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Cabin Kids, and follow us on Facebook as well. And on all those platforms, you're gonna be notified of all the new content when it's posted. If you wanna reach out to us with any prayer requests or questions you might have, send us an email or a message on Facebook, or you're welcome to use the address below here.
Some of you will know that my wife and I spent 2 years teaching at a Canadian school in Cairo. And yes, we saw the pyramids many times. The first time, of course, was the most memorable, the one that will stick with me the most. Just seeing the sheer size of the pyramids, the great pyramids of Giza, and seeing the size of the bricks too, and how big they were to make up these pyramids. So because they're so big, it's hard to take a picture of you in front of them. So you see in this picture here, my wife and I, you can't even see the bottom because, you know, unless you have a super wide angle lens, you're not going to be able to capture all of it in the picture. And if you look really, really carefully at the bottom corner, and if you squint really hard, you might be able to see a tiny little camel. Well, in the next picture is that camel and standing in front of the pyramids. And here you also get an idea of how big they are, but you still don't really get to see how big each individual brick is. So that's why you have to go even closer. And here you can see my wife Bethany standing beside the bricks at the very base of the pyramid. So that gives you an idea of how big these stones were that had to be hewn, cut, transported, measured, fit perfectly into place to make these pyramids without computers, without engineering, without modern engineering or modern machines to be able to do any of this from. It's incredible. Now, a little bit south of those pyramids is another pyramid called the Saqqara Step Pyramid. And when we were there, our tour guide George told us that this is where he thinks Joseph would have been distributing grain and maybe would have met his brothers here. So it's pretty cool to think that we were there in this, place where some of this stuff could have happened. We don't really know for sure, but of course, it's cool to think. Today, what we're going to do is kind of like those pictures of the pyramids. We're going to zoom really close in on the life of Joseph, and we're going to see how his story fits in the greater biblical narrative, and also, specifically, what we can learn from him on how to reflect Jesus always. So, just like those TV shows you watch on Netflix, or, they say, previously on, whatever, I don't know what kind of shows people watch these days, but that's what we're going to do to get kind of caught up to speed here. So, if we go back to like the previous season, we start with Abraham, right? God calls him, there's a promise to him that he's going to be bless the whole nations through his offspring. And he, of course, is going to have the promised land, Canaan. And Isaac comes as a result of that promise, a child of the really, really, really old age. And there's the story of him almost being sacrificed, which, of course, is kind of like a preview or like a prelude to Jesus. And then Isaac has Esau and Jacob, twins, with Esau being the older, but Jacob cheats and swindles his brother out of the blessing and out of the birthright. That, of course, makes Esau really mad. So Jacob has to run away and live with his uncle, and he works for him, and he wants to marry his daughter Rachel, who is, really beautiful. So he has to work 7 years, but his uncle cheats him and gives the older daughter instead, Leah, to Jacob. So Jacob has to work another 7 years to marry Rachel, the one that he is in love with. And that creates this rivalry and bitterness, and even leads to a childbearing competition between these two wives. Leah, who is unloved, God allows her to have lots of children, and Rachel, who is loved, is barren. She's not able to have children, but she does have children eventually, Joseph and Benjamin, who are going to be important in the story. So Leah has 6 children, Rachel has 2, Joseph, Benjamin, and on top of that, they also each give their servants, their maid servants, to Jacob to try to win this childbearing competition. So there's 2 born of Zilpah, which is the maidservant of Leah, and 2 born of Bilhah, which is the maidservant of Rachel. So in total, if you add them all up, 6 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, that gives you the 12 tribes, or the 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel. So that wraps up the previous season, and now let's look at kind of the previous episode, what happened in the chapter before. Joseph is highly favored because he's the oldest son of Rachel, the wife who Jacob really loves. And he tattles on his brothers when he's 17. That's kind of where this all starts. And he brings a bad report about them. They're working in the fields. He brings a bad report about them. Then they don't like him anymore because he's tattled on them. Joseph's dad gives him a beautiful robe, the robe of many colors. Probably heard of it. And beautiful, beautiful robe, and his brothers are all dressed, in kind of normal clothes, normal shepherd clothes. And Joseph has 2 dreams. Dream 1, him and his brothers are working in the field. They bundle up their grain, and they bring it and set it down, and all the brothers' bundles of grains bow down towards Joseph's. Dream 2, the 11 stars, the sun, and the moon now bow down to Joseph. And all his brothers and his dad, seem to understand what it means. They're like, what? You think we're all going to bow down to you, and mom and dad too? Because of this, they hate him, like really, really strong hatred. It says in chapter 37, they can't even speak a kind word to him. Huge hatred fueled by this jealousy and this envy of their brother. Dad sends Joseph to go check on his brothers again and check on the flock. His brothers see him coming, and they think, hey, let's end this guy and his dreams. Let's put an end to it. Reuben, the oldest brother, says, he's our own flesh and blood. Let's not kill him. Let's just throw him in this pit here. So, okay, sure, they agree. They strip him of his robe. They throw him in the pit. Some traders are passing by while they're sitting down to eat dinner, and Judah is the one who comes up with the idea to sell him. If we kill him, that doesn't do us any good, but let's sell him. At least we get a little bit of cash, right? So they sell him for 20 shekels of silver. Reuben comes back to rescue the child, and he's mad, not because his brother is sold, but he's mad because now his plan has failed. And there's another side story about him and how he royally screwed up as the firstborn, and maybe this was him trying to get back in his dad's good graces. Anyways, now Joseph has been sold, and they cover it up. They tear his beautiful coat, put some blood from a goat that they kill on it, and give it to their dad. And their dad puts 2 and 2 together and figures, oh, he's been attacked by a wild animal. He mourns, and he refuses to be consoled. This is his favorite child, and he's devastated. So all that brings us to chapter 39. Let's read it. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian, who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household and entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So he left in Joseph's care everything he had. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome, not like me. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of him and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns is entrusted to me. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought here to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his coat beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him the story. "That Hebrew slave you brought came here to make sport of me, but as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him, put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in everything he did. So, what do we see from Joseph? Sold into slavery, his brothers basically left him for dead. Then he's falsely accused, thrown into a prison. Is he sulking? Does he throw a pity party for one with no one else invited? Does he make excuses for his, make excuses? Does he rationalize his sin or succumb to temptation? Does he withdraw in the name of self-preservation or maybe even selfishness? Does he gloat when he's raised to power? No, he doesn't do any of these things because God was with him. And specifically, two things struck me about him. Joseph served with humility and purity. We don't really know it for sure, but I bet strongly that because of how he was raised and the intense favoritism he experienced, he was not a humble teenager, right? We can think about most 17-year-olds. Probably he exhibited the entitlement that plagues our culture right now so pervasively, probably pretty similar. There's a beautiful word, absolutely beautiful, not beautiful to pronounce, but a beautiful word in German, Backpfeifengesicht. Hopefully I said it close enough to the correct pronunciation, which translates to something along the lines of a face that's crying out for a fist, right? Isn't that a great word? A face that's crying out for a fist. In English, we talk about, "Oh, I just want to wipe that look off his face." That's probably how his brothers felt, right? Joseph possibly had a Backpfeifengesicht, a face just crying out for a fist. Now, that doesn't excuse their behavior, and certainly they went a lot farther than just punching him in the face, which, is how most brothers deal with their problems. But at least we can kind of relate to them. We don't see that continue in Joseph, though. Dire circumstances can often teach humility, and that's what it seems to have done in this case. Sometimes they can do the opposite, though. They can lead us to sulk, make excuses, rationalize sin, a whole bunch of other stuff. But that's not what we see in Joseph. Through the crappy situations that Joseph encountered, being sold into slavery, being wrongly accused and imprisoned, he served with humility and purity. And, probably this prison wasn't, like what we think of it. It was more like probably a dungeon, right? He couldn't take classes. He didn't get 3 nice meals a day. He couldn't, he couldn't call his family and things like that. But still, he serves with humility and purity. It's hard to reflect God's light if we're trying to generate our own light, right? If we're trying to have people look at us rather than look to God when they see us and see our deeds and our successes. In verse 3, clearly we see that Potiphar saw that the Lord was with Joseph. Joseph's success is clearly attributed to God, and we'll continue to see this in the rest of the story of Joseph. You can't reflect Jesus and his goodness and his light if you aren't acting in humility. And God isn't going to use you in the same way if you're going to be the one getting the glory, right? Because the glory is due him. He's the rightful recipient of all the glory. He's not going to share it with you. You don't deserve any of it. It's also hard to reflect God and reflect his goodness or his light if sin is clouding our lives. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 20 to 23 says, "In a large house there are articles not only of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay. Some are used for special purposes and some for common use. Those who cleanse themselves will be instruments for special purposes, made holy, useful to the master, and prepared to do any good work. Flee from the desires of youth and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the name of the Lord out of a pure heart." And then it goes on to say, don't have anything to do with it. It lists out a whole bunch of stuff. Flee from the evil desires of youth. Then you'll be able to be used by God. You'll be a special instrument that God can use, right? If you've got company coming over or, Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving, right? What are you going to get out? Your scratched and dirty plates? You're going to pick them out of the dishwasher before it's been run through and no, you're not going to do that for your guests. You're going to get the nice stuff, the good stuff out, right? It's the same with God. He wants to use us. We've got to be ready. Joseph correctly does this. He flees from temptation and he recognizes his temptation for what it is and what it will lead to. Sinning against God, right? He says, if I do this, I'm sinning against God. Of course, he'll be sinning against Potiphar, but primarily his sin's against God. And if we only view our sin as, affecting us or affecting corporations or, affecting the government or affecting others, then we don't correctly see for what it is, right? Against God, it's a sin against him, right? It might seem like less of an offense to steal from, big megacorp Walmart. They're not going to notice if something goes missing. It's not really going to affect anyone. Or, it's just me, the sin is only going to affect me. But we need to recognize that our sin is against God. Joseph does that. He has a correct view of his sin. And he deals with his temptation. He doesn't entertain it or dabble near it, and he refused to go to bed with her or even be near her. And it says, exactly as it says in Timothy, he flees from the temptation. So, no matter the crappy or crazy or cozy or incredible, I couldn't think of another C word, situation you find yourself in, serve with humility and purity. Right? No matter the crappy or crazy or cozy or incredible situation, serve with humility and purity, even if you're in jail, right? Even if you've been sold into slavery, even if your family has deserted you or abused you, or all those things happened to Joseph, and he served with humility and purity. What kind of situation are you in today? Maybe you're cozy and you just want to, pull the covers up and stay nice and cozy, and, well, that's not how you're going to reflect. So let's continue with the story. Chapter 40, we're continuing on here. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master. Pharaoh was angry with his 2 officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the 2 men, the cupbearer and the baker, had a dream, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him, "Why are your faces so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there's no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said, "In my dream I saw a vine. In front of me and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." "This is what it means," Joseph told him. 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position. And you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand just as you used to when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show kindness to me. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison, for I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I've done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head there were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket of my head." "This is what it means," Joseph said. 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat away your flesh." Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so that once again he put the cup in Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Now I'm going to skip ahead to verse 8. So 2 full years have passed. In the morning, Pharaoh's mind was troubled. He sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dream, but no one could interpret them for him. The chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "Today I'm reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream that same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hanged. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he quickly was brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to him, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." "I cannot do it." That's what he says to Pharaoh. "I cannot do it," Joseph said. "But God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "In my dream I was standing on the bank of a Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek. They grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell what they had done. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In my dreams I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin, scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to the magicians, but no one could explain it to me." Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he's about to do. God has done it. The 7 cows are the 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It's one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterwards are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain, scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he's about to do. 7 years of abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because the famine that follows it will be so severe." The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land and take a fifth of the harvest during Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man, in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." So this happens when Joseph is 30, and we're going to skip ahead to verse 53. The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to all the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt. And all the countries came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe in all the world. So again, we don't see Joseph sulking or making excuses. Even after he's forgotten by the chief cupbearer, he's actively serving. And more than that, he's alert and noticing. God is at work and wants to use you. Are you alert and looking for those opportunities? For Joseph, his alertness was as simple as noticing and asking and listening. But how often do we stop at the first part, at noticing? Joseph noticed their faces were dejected, and certainly he had duties and he had other stuff probably to do, but he didn't just notice, he asked and he listened. And probably he had also invested in a relationship with these two men before, because they were pretty quick to confide in him. It was never going to be enough for him to just be, a model neighbor, a model citizen in the prison. They would never have sought him out. He was active. He was engaged. He was serving. There's a great song by Jars of Clay called Headphones, and I'll read just a quick line from that song. Some of you might know it. "It's a heavy world. It's too much for me to care. If I close my eyes, it's not there with my headphones on." It talks about how easy it is for us as Christians to disengage from the world, to just put in our music or be focused on other things and not be noticing and asking and listening like Joseph did. It would have been easy and even completely understandable for Joseph in that dungeon, falsely accused, with no hope for justice, to withdraw. But God was with him, and God is with you, Emmanuel, right? Praise God. Thank you, Jesus, that you are with us. So don't withdraw. God is with you. And in a place that was so dark, Joseph chose to shine, right? To reflect God's light. So Joseph noticed they were dejected. He asked, then he listened to them, and then he plainly spoke God's truth. Who in your life needs plain truth? Not with a side of snark, or not with a side of passive aggressiveness or a side of judgment, just plain truth. God's truth. What do they need to hear? And that's what Joseph gives them. He speaks plainly God's truth. And to top it all off, he gives God the credit. Again, we hear, right? It wasn't Joseph getting the credit for things. He clearly gives that to God. Not just once, but many times in verse 8, chapter 40, verse 8, and again in chapter 41, verse 16, verse 25, verse 28, and verse 32. And Pharaoh couldn't help but notice that God was with him. Who is a man like this? Let's put him in charge quick, right? He sees that God is with him. So no matter the crappy or crazy or cozy or incredible situation you find yourself in, actively serve with humility and purity, being alert for how God wants to use you. That's how you reflect Jesus always. just like those shows have previously on, sometimes shows or movies will also have stuff come up at the end, right? To tell you what happened next in the story, or how that person's decisions went on. And so it's the same with Joseph here. We're not going to read all the way from 42 to 50, but let me just quickly summarize what happens. So Joseph sells grain to Egyptians and to other nations as well. Pharaoh and Egypt become insanely rich because of that. Jacob, living in Canaan, right, hears that, hey, there's food in Egypt. He sends his 10 sons down, leaving Benjamin at home. He sends them to go buy grain, right? He doesn't want anything to happen to Benjamin. He's the only son left of his favorite wife, Rachel, as far as he knows, right? So they go to buy grain, and of course they have to come through Joseph, the man in charge. Joseph recognizes them, and he asks them, he interrogates them, and accuses them of being spies. He's testing them to see if they have really repented. They say, we're not spies. We're all brothers. We even have a brother at home. And then Joseph said, okay, well, prove it then, right? Bring your other brother here so I know. And he detains Simeon until they can come back and prove that, they're telling the truth. But we can see that he's already forgiven them. He provides for them. He's gracious to them. He's testing them. He wants to see if they repented, but he provides for them. He even puts their money back in their grain sacks with them. The food runs out. So again, their brothers are saying, hey, Dad, we've got to go back to Egypt. We've got to buy more food. And he says, no way, you're not taking Benjamin with you. Judah, right, he was the one who stepped up with the idea to sell Joseph. Now he's stepping up and he says, look, I will be responsible for Benjamin. I will be accountable. Let's go. We could have been there and back already multiple times. Let's go buy grain so we can, live and not die. So they go down, this time 11 brothers, and they appear before Joseph. Joseph cries when he sees Benjamin. And again, he generously provides for them, but this time he sneaks his special silver cup into Benjamin's sack with his grain. Then, when they're leaving town, he chases after them and accuses them, hey, what do you think you're doing? And they say, no, we didn't do this. He says, whoever is the one who stole is going to become my servant. The rest of you can go. I'm just going to keep that one as my servant. And of course, they find it's in Benjamin's sack, and they tear their clothes. The brothers are completely devastated because they know, they promised that they were going to look after their son. Judah, again, steps up. He says, take me instead. And he spills the beans. He tells the whole story about how they sold Joseph and how their dad was so sad about it, and now they can't do it again. And he says, take me. And Joseph can't take it any longer. He completely breaks down. He reveals himself. He says, look, I'm your brother. Don't worry, I'm your brother. And of course, they're freaking out. They don't believe him. He has to say it many, many times. I'm your brother. Don't worry, I'm your brother. He's forgiven them, and they've repented. He brings their family down to live in Egypt with them. He takes care of them. He provides for them. He gives them land. And generations later, when they leave during the Exodus, then, right, as it says, all the Egyptians are just offloading this, say, get out of here, and they give them their wealth. So through this, we can see that this wealth gets transferred to Israel. God had a plan all along, and that is what they used to build the tabernacle and the temple, the Ark of the Covenant, and all the different articles of gold and silver and stuff for the tabernacle. So it's cool to see this story and how God used it. And for us, how do we reflect God's light and his goodness and his love? Well, Joseph gives us a pretty good example of what to do. No matter the crappy or crazy or cozy or incredible situation you find yourself in, actively serve with humility and purity. And while you're doing that, you got to be alert, being alert for how God wants to use you. Actively serve with humility and purity, being alert for how God wants to use you. Now, I'm going to describe someone to you, and you tell me who I'm talking about. 1, this person was sent on a special mission from their father to check on the flock. They were hated and rejected by his brothers. They were jealous and envious of him. He was betrayed and sold for pieces of silver, and he was falsely accused. 2 others were facing judgment alongside him. One was saved, and the other wasn't. He was miraculously raised to power, which also was foretold. He was acknowledged first by the Gentiles, and then by the Jews. And it was all to bring about the salvation of the world. Who am I talking about? Now you're probably like, duh, Nathan, you just told us the story of Joseph. Why are you repeating it? But doesn't it also remind you of someone else? Can't we go through this list and check off each item about someone else? Jesus, right? How cool is that there's this story in the Bible that so closely relates and parallels Jesus' story, right? It's not a coincidence. God knew, right? You can't make this stuff up. Jesus was sent on a mission from his Father to come check on us, his flock, right? He was hated and rejected by his brothers, the Israelites, and especially the leaders, the religious leaders. They were jealous and envious of him. He was betrayed and sold for pieces of silver. Judas, right, got 30 pieces of silver, and Judah got 20, right? You can't make that up. It's a little bit more just probably because of inflation, but it's basically the same story. He was falsely accused. He was, thrown on the cross for nothing he had done, and 2 others were facing judgment alongside of him, right? The other 2 criminals. One of them was saved, and the other wasn't, kept mocking him. He was miraculously raised up, which was also foretold, and it was acknowledged by the Gentiles. The Jews didn't accept him. They still don't, most of them, right? But it's coming. It's coming. God has promised that they will accept him later, first by the Gentiles and then by the Jews. And it was all to bring about the salvation of the world. In Joseph's story, right, his brothers are like, what? You think we're going to bow down to you? Right? You're not our leader. You're not our master. Same thing to Jesus, right? But it will come. God has told it. It will come. All of that was to bring about the salvation of the world. How cool is it that God can use something so evil for good? And that's exactly what Joseph said. The last little bit I'm going to read. Chapter 50, starting at verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and wants to pay us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph, saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you're to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers for the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now, please forgive the sins of your servants, of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what's been done, now the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. He had forgiven them. He recognized it. Am I God? No, this is not me. This is not about me. This is not my light or my plan of salvation. This is not something of me. God did this. It's him. It's God. He's reflecting God. No doubt you faced some pretty crappy or crazy situations in your life. I'd be surprised, though, if they're as bad as Joseph. Right? Have you been left for dead? Probably you faced animosity from your family, but probably not to the extent he has. Probably haven't been wrongly imprisoned. But if God can use that evil for good, then surely he can use whatever situation you've been placed in. And what about Jesus? Right? If God can use the greatest act of evil to accomplish the greatest act of good, certainly he can be trusted with whatever crazy or crappy or incredible or cozy situation you're facing right now, and use that for good and use that to reflect him. Your part in all this, though, really is quite simple. It's just that. It's just to reflect. Right? We're not fireflies. No matter how hard you squeeze, it's not going to shine. Something else is going to happen, and it's not going to be as good. Trust me. right? Our job is just to reflect. No matter the crappy or crazy or cozy or incredible situation you find yourself in, actively serve with humility and purity, being alert for how God is going to use you. That's how you always reflect Jesus. Maybe today you're convicted of sin, temptation in your life that you haven't been fleeing from. Right? Joseph's brothers, or Joseph brought a bad report against his brothers, and what did they do? They hated him. They beat him up. They, don't do that to me. If the Holy Spirit's nudging you of something, right? I don't have a nice multicolored coat that you can steal. Maybe there's something you need to flee from, right? Flee from temptation. God will give you the strength to do that. But how are you going to respond? Maybe today you've been convicted of a way that you need to serve, right? To go beyond just, asking, to listening or speaking truth or some way that you got to serve beyond just that noticing or that asking, that first step. Maybe today you've been convicted of your pride. For me, it was all three, all right? As I've been preparing for this, I've been convicted of all three. But whatever it is that the Holy Spirit's elbowing you about right now, you need to act on it. But remember, God is with you, just like he was with Joseph. He's with you now, Emmanuel. God is with you, and he will help you to reflect Jesus always. Let's pray. God, our Father, thank you so much that you are with us. Thank you for Jesus, Emmanuel. Thank you for using all the wide variety of stuff that we experience in our life. Thank you that you can be trusted, as it says, to work all things out for good for those who trust you and are called according to your purpose, who are seeking to reflect you and serve you. God, help us to do that. Whatever the people listening here today are being convicted of, God, I pray that you would help them act on that. Help me act on that, to flee from temptation or to serve in the way that you are calling me to, or to back away and serve in humility rather than pride. God, thank you for how you've given us such a clear hint that shouts your name and that just shows your word and how incredible your word is, and that it can be trusted, and that you're just such an incredible God who is so real to be able to work out a story like this. Thank you. We love you so much. Amen.
Thanks so much for hanging out today. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channels and follow us on Facebook so that you'll be notified of the content there and stay up to date with everything happening in the church. If you enjoyed today's message, it would really mean a lot to us if you would like, comment, and share the video so that others can enjoy it too. If you happen to be in the Kingston area, like I said before, come on out. We would love to see you. If you're limited to online connection though, not a problem. Just make sure you check out our website for more at-home worship. And like I mentioned before, the link to our website is in the box below here that has other helpful resources for you as well. Please know that you are loved and that we are praying for you. And we certainly appreciate your prayers too. We'll see you soon.